right. So my name is Lindsay Latham. I'm the Grant Management Section Chief at the Missouri State Parks, and this is the 2024 Trails Program Grant Application Workshop. What is the Recreational Trail Program, or RTP for short? RTP is a federal pass-through grant funded by the Federal Highway Administration and administered by Missouri by the Department of Natural Resources Division of State Parks Grant Management Section. It was first created by the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act of 1991 and has been through several authorizations since then. RTP is currently operating under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, Infrastructure Investment and Job Act. Funding RTP comes from the Federal Highway Trust Fund. Specifically, it's the tax dollars used for non-motorized recreation. The funding is dedicated to the development of recreational trails and trails-related facilities such as trailheads, parking lots, etc. Missouri's had RTP funding for about 25 years now. This map shows a geographical distribution of funds statewide up to 2016. Nearly $28 million in funding over 360 projects have been awarded statewide. Who can apply? The Recreational Trails Program funds a broad range of applicants. Applicants can include local and state government, public and private schools, including colleges and universities, and not-for-profit organizations like trail clubs, land trusts, and youth groups. Federal agencies are allowed to apply for motorized funding only. All applicants who apply for funding must be able to commit to having their trail project open and available to the public use for a minimum of 25 years. RTP is a matching grant program. The federal share, or the amount that you can request, is up to 80% of the total project costs, which means that you're required to contribute a minimum of 20% match. You can provide more than 20% match, but it's not required. Your match can be all in cash or a combination of cash and in-kind contributions, such as volunteer labor, in-house labor, or in-house use of equipment. You can also use donations as part of your match, like labor, equipment, etc. This is a reimbursable grant program, which means the cost must be incurred prior to receiving a reimbursement. Frequent reimbursements are encouraged. The maximum amount in grant funding that can be requested is $250,000, and the minimum is $25,000. The 2024 apportionment will be for Missouri will be around $1.3 million. What projects are eligible for RTP? In Appendix B of the Open Project Selection Process, or OPSP for short, there's a detailed list of projects that are eligible. I've listed a few here. Construction of new trailheads, construction of trailside amenities like overlook trails and signage, etc. Trailhead facilities, including parking areas, restrooms, anything related to the trail could be funded with RTP. And trail connectors, acquisition of land or right-of-way easements, and restoration and repairs of existing recreational trails. The funding can be used to rent or lease equipment that will be needed for your trail construction or rehabilitation. Equipment maintenance and the purchase of trail equipment may be eligible if the use for the sole purpose of trail rehabilitation, maintenance, and construction. Funding can also be used for the assessment of trail conditions for accessibility and maintenance when it's part of a trail construction project. What projects are ineligible for RTP funding? Federal Highway Administration has determined that the following projects are inconsistent with RTP legislation. Some of the most common ineligible projects are paths or sidewalks along or adjacent to public roads or streets, unless the path or street or sidewalk is needed to complete a missing link to other recreational trails. Improvements to roads and or bridges intended to be generally accessible by low clearance passenger vehicles, unless those roads/bridges are specifically designated for recreational trail use by the managing agency. RTP funds cannot be used for condemnation of any kind of interest in property. If a project proposal is solely for the purpose of trail planning, this would not be eligible, but if the trail planning is a relatively small portion of our overall trail project, it may be allowable. All project proposals for the purpose of performing a trail feasibility study would not be eligible. Here's a link to the Federal Highway Administration's RTP website with guidance. How do I apply? The first step is the one that everyone is doing today, which is attending a grant application workshop. The second step is completing the application and submitting it to the grant management section by mailing 2 paper copies to the address at the bottom of the application form. The form cannot be emailed, and handwritten applications will not be accepted. The application must be postmarked or received by February 21st, 2021. I have included Patty and I's phone number. You can call either of us if you have any questions. Please don't let the questions in the application overwhelm you. If you don't understand an answer to a question, if you don't understand how to answer a question, step 1 is to read the instructions in the guide, and step 2 is to give us a call. What happens after you send in your application and all your supporting documentation? After the application has been received, we prepare a packet containing all of the applications that are eligible for scoring and send the documentation to the Missouri Trail Advisory Board. This is a citizen advisory board made up of 8 members. Board members are selected for their expertise and represent different types of trail use, like equestrian, off-highway motorcycle, water trails, mountain biking, bicycling trails. The board members will look at your application individually and score it based on the criteria listed on the score sheet at the end of the OPSP. The grant application guide explains how the points are allocated to each section. After scoring all of the applications, the board is scheduled to convene in April to discuss the merits of each application and prepare a list of projects recommended for funding. The grant management section will submit our list to our director for his preliminary approval. Once we get the division's approval, we contact the applicants of the projects that have been preliminarily selected and schedule a pre-approval site inspection to verify that everything in the application is as it was described. We will conduct our risk assessment at this time to evaluate your capability of complying with the requirements of the grant. Once we have completed our pre-approval site inspection and risk assessment, we will put together a list of projects recommended for funding to send to our division and department director for approval. We will also send a list of projects to the Federal Highway Administration for their preliminary approval. Once the notice of award, project agreements, and letter of regrets will be sent to all applicants in the fall, typically in October. At this time, applicants of projects that have been awarded will be invited to attend a mandatory grant administration workshop where we'll discuss oversight and management of the project, as well as long-term stewardship requirements. After you attend the mandatory workshop, we will send you a letter with your first notice to proceed with phase 1 of your project, and then you'll have 3 years to complete your project from start to finish. Just for fun, we're going to play a game called RTP Application to show a visual representation of how the process works. So I click here. First step is to complete and submit your application and send all supporting documentation. Next, the Trail Advisory Board will review, score, and rank the application. Then you will receive a notice of award and a project agreement form from the department. Next, you will attend a mandatory grant administrative workshop where we will cover over the state and federal requirements for the environmental review, project costs, and procurement. Also, this time, you're allowed to start administering your grant. Then you can be able to conduct the environmental review. The National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, requires a review to make sure the project isn't negatively impacting any resource. Once you complete the environmental review and send us your supporting documentation, we will review the NEPA and send it to the Federal Highway Administration to see if your project qualifies as a categorical exclusion. Federal Highways will contact the tribes and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Once all the information has been acquired, Federal Highways Administration will review and approve the NEPA. At this point, we will send a letter saying you have the notice to proceed. Your project is a category exclusion. We now begin incurring costs. You cannot incur costs until you have a letter from us saying your project NEPA has been approved. Now you can start requesting reimbursements for the expenses that you have incurred throughout the life of the project. Now that we have talked about how to apply and what happens after you apply, I want to show you where you can download the application. So the application's on our website. It's a fillable form, so you can download it. We recommend that you use Adobe for downloading and completing the application. Handwritten applications will not be accepted. 2 hard copies of the final application should be mailed to the grant management section. The next part of this presentation will be us walking through the grant application step by step and discussing how to answer the application questions. Betty, are there any questions at this point we want to see before we move on to the next step?
No, there are not.
All right, we'll just keep rocking it. Let's go. All right. On the first page of the application, question 1, this is the name of the agency organization requesting the grant. This is who's actually applying for and will be administering the grant once awarded. The receiving official should match the name and title in the resolution and will also be the person signing the application. Question 3 is the name of the person who prepared the application. So if you hired someone to prepare the application, or if a regional planning commission, RPC for short, is helping you, the name of that person would go here. Sometimes it's the same person writing the grant and administering the grant. If you have questions about the application itself, we are going to if we have applications about the application itself, we're going to call the application preparer. But if we have questions about the grant, we'll be contacting the person listed in question 4. Along with administering grant, this person will also need to attend mandatory administration workshop. Questions 5 through 8 ask about your representatives and the Regional Planning Commission. These are the people who may be notified if the grant application is awarded. Question 9 asks site-specific questions where the project is located, for instance, the county, township, range, section, also the latitude and longitude. Please use decimal degrees for the latitude and longitude. Questions 10 through 12 ask to provide information about your organization's background and prior performance with DNR. Pursuant to 2 CFR 200, we are required to conduct a risk assessment of all applicants to ensure that we are good stewards of taxpayers' dollars and that we are only awarding grants to entities that have the capacity to manage the project. If you are selected to move into round 2, you'll be asked to provide additional information to complete the risk assessment process, such as a copy of your most recent audit and accounting and procurement policies and procedures. These questions should be answered based on the organization listed in the question 1. So, for example, the City of Missouriville's Parks and Recreation Department is the applicant. The information in this section should reflect the department as opposed to the city as a whole. In question 12, please note that we're asking you to provide performance history information for grants received by DNR as a whole, not just the RTP program, which may include LWCF, RTP, HPF, scrap tire, clean water grants, etc. Please be sure to provide accurate information regarding your previous grants. Also note that this is the first time within the application points are given to a section. Since we strive to distribute grants throughout the entire state, a project sponsor who has never received an RTP grant will receive more points than a project sponsor with an active RTP grant. Questions 13 through 22 are asking you to describe the project. Question 13 asks what category your project falls into. There are 5 categories for projects, which are non-motorized single use, non-motorized diverse use, both non-motorized and motorized diverse use, and motorized single use and motorized diverse use. Federal regulations state for the recreational trails program, we are required to fund projects at a 30-30-40 ratio, meaning 40% of our projects must be a diverse use, 30 for motorized, and 30 for single use. An example of a non-motorized single use would be a trail open to just walkers or a water trail that's just open to kayaking and canoeing. An example of a non-motorized diverse use trail would have at least two different types of trail use. This category results in 3 points. For example, a hiking and biking trail or a biking and equestrian trail. E-bikes are considered non-motorized. An example of a non-motorized motorized diverse use would be a water trail that allows kayakers and canoers, but also allows the use of boaters with outboard motors to use. Another example of a non-motorized motorized. Another example would be an ATV trail that allows ATVs as well as equestrian on the trails. This can be seasonal dependent, such as you allow ATVs in the spring, summer, and fall, and allow equestrian in the winter. A motorized single-use project would be an ATV trail it's only for that type of use. Motorized diverse use would accommodate ATVs and motorbikes. Question 14 asks whether your project is a new development or a rehabilitation/repair of an existing project. Let's say you have a project that's both new development and rehabilitation. For example, you're going to build a new section of a trail, but you're also going to rehab the current trail system. If 60% of your project costs are for new construction, then it would be considered a new development. Then the boxes under new development for new trail construction, new trail side, new trailhead amenities, and new trail connector to existing areas. The same categories exist for rehab and repair sections, which would be for existing trails, existing amenities, existing connectors. There's also a box to indicate whether or not you're going to be acquiring property or easements. Questions 15 and 16 ask where your project is going to be constructed. If the project sponsor owns or leases the property, a deed or lease agreement must be submitted with the application. The lease must be a minimum of 25 years, and a signature of the landowner or other interest holding parties acknowledge a 25-year commitment to maintain an outdoor recreational use. If the project sponsor has a permanent trail easement or a temporary construction easement, a copy of the easement agreement must be submitted as well. Or in the case of a project on state or federal lands, a draft memorandum agreement between the agency and the sponsor must be submitted. The MOA must commit the land managing agency to maintain public access for the project for a minimum of 25 years and acknowledge their commitment to record the deed declaration of deed restrictions to the deed of the property. Agreement must also give the project sponsor access to construct on the property and must outline the roles and responsibilities for bidding or contracting for any design and construction work involved in the project. If the applicant is a not-for-profit organization constructing on public land, the landholder agency must agree to fulfill the 25-year stewardship requirement should the non-for-profit agency dissolve before the end of the stewardship period. If recommended for funding, a signed memorandum of agreement must be executed prior to the award of grant funds. Questions 17 and 18 ask you to list all present, existing, and reasonable anticipated liens or mortgages or both on the property, and the effects the recreational easements that will be required if any right-of-way easements, reversionary interests associated with the property. Identifying outstanding mortgages, loans, amounts still owed, and describe the amount these will affect on the current project. If a loan will be required to complete this grant, please indicate how much you anticipate borrowing and for what duration. Because the property located within the RTP project will be dedicated to outdoor public use for 25 years, it's important to identify any parties who may have superior interest. Please list all right-of-way easements, permanent or temporary, or reversionary interests associated with the site. Question 19 asks you to tell us what you intend to use the project for. Check all that apply. This lets us know whether your trail can accommodate bicycling, like walking, jogging, hiking, backpacking, equestrian, canoeing, kayaking, motorized boating, ATV use, etc. Page 17 of the application guide has definitions for each type of these uses to help you decide which category your project falls under. The Recreational Trails Program prohibits condemnation of any kind of interest in property. Therefore, acquisition or lease of land or right-of-way easements on which to develop a trail project must be from a willing landowner. Additionally, must be for a period of 25 years. Provisions state that an easement or lease agreement cannot be detrimental to the proposed recreational development. The easement or lease agreement must also state that it cannot be revoked at will by the landowner, and the land must be retained in public use for the duration of the easement or lease period. All acquisitions of real property with RTP funds, whether purchased, donations, or easements or leases, must conform with the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Policy Act of 1970, known as the Uniform Act. This act applies to acquiring property with non-federal funds when the intent is to apply for RTP funds for development of a trail project. In other words, a project sponsor cannot knowingly circumvent the federal law by acquiring real property with local funds and not follow the regulation of this act, and then apply for RTP funds later to develop a trailhead or trail. The Uniform Act ensures that landowners are fully informed of their rights and are justly compensated for selling or leasing private property or selling or leasing any interest in the property, such as trail easement or temporary construction easement. As part of this insurance, the Uniform Act requires a Yellow Book appraisal and appraisal review to be performed. Additionally, the Act also covers the provision of relocation assistance to the owners or tenants displaced by the acquisition. Costs that are eligible to be included in budget. Costs that are eligible to be included in the budget under Phase 2 are costs acquiring property by title fee or use of property by be permanent or temporary easements, and an incidental cost including appraisal fees, title search fees, preparation of surveys, plats, property descriptions. It's important to remember that if you know that you'll need a temporary construction easement, land acquisition, or permanent trail easement, that you do not require land until you receive the award and the right-of-way has been approved by the Federal Highway Administration. The next two slides are examples of deed declaration restrictions that will be placed on deeds of properties where the trail or trailhead is located if the award is granted. Note that you'll be including a copy of the legal description of the trail corridor as part of the declaration. Here are some examples of declarations of deed restrictions. For project sponsors that will be constructing on property that they do not own, this is what the land holding agency will need to agree in order to record to the deed in the MOA. A copy of this declaration can be found on the RTP website. Question 20 is the title of your project with the current phase. We're asking for a very short but descriptive title because this is how we will correspond between you and us on how we will refer to the project on the agreement notice and the notice to proceed letters. Question 21 is where you should provide a full scope of the work of the project. Tell us specifically what is being constructed, repaired, and or acquired. Is this a new project, one phase of a larger project? What exactly do you plan to accomplish with this grant, and how do you plan on accomplishing it? The narrative should talk about the project's limits. For a trail, we want to know where does it start and where does it end? What type of surface materials will be present? How long will it be? How wide will it be? Is this a spur to an existing trail? Is this for repair or new construction? Or is this for amenities? When I read this section of the application, I should be able to tell that you have a well thought out and detailed plan. You should make it very clear that what's being constructed in this phase of the project. Discuss the current phase first, and then at the end, briefly explain what will be done in future phases. So here is a example of a bad project narrative. We plan to build an additional 2.1 miles of concrete trail Country Trail in Trail City, Missouri, as an extension to the Wolf Creek Trail. So very short, not much more information than that. Let's look at a example of a good narrative. The existing Wolf Creek Trail is 7.5-mile trail that stretches from Wolf Creek Park at 1001 Wolf Creek Avenue, Missouri, to Trail Park 200 Hiking Avenue, Trail City, Missouri. We're requesting funding to complete the final phase of this trail project, which will add an additional 2.1 miles of 8 feet wide paved concrete trail, extending from the trail from its current terminus in Trail Park to Trail City Public Schools at 100 Main Street. A map of the project area has been included to show both the existing trail and the proposed trail extension. If awarded, the funding will be used to hire an engineer to design the trail to comply with the American with Disability Act and oversee the construction. Grants funds will be used to pay for the materials used to construct the trails, trail signage, and safety lighting. Trail City plans to use in-house construction crew to construct the trail. 20 trees will be removed within the trail corridor from November to March only. So very clear, kind of tells us exactly what's going on and the whole scope of the project. Question 22 asks you who the project is going to benefit and why the project is needed. This is a really good opportunity to demonstrate to the Trail Advisory Board the merits of this project. So when we talk about who it benefits and what benefit is provided to the user, is there a target group that the project will be most beneficial to? Does this fill a need for a underserved segment of the population? Does this link two or more communities or provide a connection to a park or another trail? Will it provide benefit beyond trail use, such as a wildlife corridor or to protect a riparian corridor? Will it assist in increasing economic development to a local or regional area? Are there any unique features or aspects to the project? Does it have any specific natural or cultural/historical elements? Will it connect to a national historic trail or a national recreational area? Will it connect to alongside a long distance trail such as the Katy Trail? Is there urgency to complete this project? Will this project be addressing a public health and safety issue? Will it be addressing an environmental issue? Will it be addressing a compliance issue? Is there a time sensitive aspect of this project, such as an imminent land sale? So those are some of those things that you use some of these prompts to kind of answer this part right here in this question on question 22. The next section, questions 23 through 31, you'll notice the entire section is worth up to 35 points. Question 23 is asking how will this project meet a need identified in the local, regional, or statewide management plan? Make sure you include a copy of the section that describes and identifies a need of the master plan with your supporting documentation. Also, take the time to describe how this project aligns with a SCORP priority. The Statewide Comprehensive Outdoor Recreational Plan, or SCORP, is a 5-year planning documentation that identifies outdoor recreational issues of the statewide significance and evaluates the supply of and demand for outdoor recreational resources and trail needs throughout Missouri. The SCORP can be found on our website. I recommend you look through pages 73 through 76 and identify which goal objective your project will be meeting. See the goal number and explain how the project will meet the objective. Question 24, another really important part of this section is if you've solicited public opinion in your community in regard to the trail project. This can be illustrated to us in a number of different ways. Maybe you held a public meeting or maybe a Facebook poll. The results demonstrate that there is a need and a demand for the project. Make sure you include a copy of the documentation that shows you've completed the public engagement, such as flyers, meetings, sign-in sheets, results of polls, etc. Question 25, ask you to identify accessibility standards are being addressed and describe the accessibility challenges that exist and how you plan to overcome them. You should indicate how the project meets American Disability Act, ADA, and the Architectural Barrier Act, ABA standards. Explain any challenges that impact your ability to comply with ADA/ABA standards and how the project will overcome those challenges. For projects that use RTP funding for development of trail amenities such as restrooms, parking areas, accessible routes, shelters, drinking fountains, etc., these facilities must be ADA compliant. For convenience, an accessibility checklist has been posted on the RTP website that provides the ADA standards for most of trailhead amenities, such as parking, access routes, restrooms, water fountains, hydrants, overlooks, etc. Project sponsors are encouraged to consult with a design professional for further assistance to ensure ADA/ABA compliance. It may not be practical to implement accessibility standards for your trail development project as opposed to a trailhead development project. However, you're still encouraged to consider providing access to the greatest extent possible for your project. There are several conditions or exceptions that may preclude making a trail accessible. For instance, a trail intended user may make it impossible to design and construct a trail that is accessible. A mountain bike trail is a good example of this. Below are links to ADA requirements for your benefit. You will also design, there is a checklist that will help, it can be located on our website. On page 20 of the OPSP, there are resources for accessibility guidance and developing trails for other pedestrian use. Question 26, will this project add value to your trails and what is the current role of the trails in your community? We want to know how this project will enhance the area and what will it mean to develop this project? How will this project impact the community? Question 27, what are the contributing design elements that have been considered in regards to preserving environmental resources? For example, will you be adding native wildflower to the area for native species to forage and use? We want you to describe what steps you'll take to avoid impacts to cultural/historical resources or threatened endangered species. Will you be taking steps to try to prevent the spread of invasive species, such as planting native landscaping? What steps will you take to be a good neighbor and like minimizing trespassing? If your project's in an area, if your project in your area has had an environmental review, include a copy of the full report with this application. You should summarize the result of the report, such as thus agency completed an environmental review of the project area and determined there is no impacts. Question 28 describes what sustainability considerations would be addressed with this project. For instance, the choosing of location minimizing erosion or energy conservation, such as solar lights. Question 29 asks what safety concerns will be addressed in this project, such as appropriate trail width, adequate sight lines at trail crossings, overhead clearances, lighting, trail signage, vehicle barriers, etc. Question 30 asks about construction or rehabilitation projects and who will be doing the work in each phase. If you intend to use in-house labor for construction of the project, submit a cost analyst that compares in-house labor to contract labor. In order to approve the use of in-house labor, you must demonstrate that in-house or volunteer labor is more cost-effective than contracted labor. If you intend to hire an engineer for design, construction, and oversight, this should be listed here. Detail who will be performing each phase of the project. Don't list specific vendors because you'll need to follow the proper procurement and bidding procedures. Question 31 asks you to provide a detailed post-completion plan for your project. Project sponsors are required to maintain all RTP construction projects for public access for a minimum of 25 years. This question is designed to demonstrate that you have the resources, plan, and available eligibility for long-term care. Questions 32 and 33 ask you to talk about partnerships, donors, contributions that will be associated with this project. For example, several grant recipients use AmeriCorps, Girl Scouts, or Boy Scouts. An example would have the American Corps help with a portion of building a trail or having the Eagle Scouts build your trail kiosk. Question 33 asks you to list your donors and contributions pertaining to the project. This should be a third-party donation from someone else. Only list donors who are contributing in truly tangible ways. Do not list vendors who are promising discounts on products or services. You'll need to provide a list. You will need to provide letters of commitment from each donor stating, yes, we do intend to commit a donation if this project is funded, and this is the value of our donation. The total of donation listed here should equal the total donation in question 35, the budget table. If you're using federal funds or another federal grant as match for this grant, you will need to list it here. You will also need to include a supporting documentation, documentation statutes or regulation that allows you to use these funds as match for RTP. The American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA funds cannot be used as match for RTP. Question 34 asks what financial assurance you have to complete this project in 3 years. This is a reimbursable grant, so you'll need to have upfront cash to begin the project and have enough manpower to finish the project. Supporting documentation includes letter of commitment or intent to donate forms, a resolution of financial assistance letters. A template for the resolution and financial assistance letters can be found on page 9 through 10 of the application guide. Question 35, we were asking you to provide a cost estimate for your project broken down into 3 phases. You'll need to make sure that the table and the narrative equal each other and that everything listed on the scope of work, question 21, is listed in the budget narrative. The donation column should match the total from the question 33. It's very important to make sure that your budget is accurate. Phase 1 is for planning, engineering, environmental review expenditures. This includes costs associated with your environmental review process, such as archaeological or cultural resource surveys, and costs associated with designing your project, such as engineering and development of bid documentation. Only 10% of the total project budget can be in phase 1. Phase 2 asks for costs associated with the right-of-way, such as temporary construction easement, purchase or donation of land, and appraisals. Phase 3 should include all costs associated with construction, such as labor, materials, equipment usage. Make sure you break your cost down by column. If it is a cost that you are asking the grant to pay, place it in column 1. If the project sponsor are paying the cost, place the amount in column 2. Or if it's a contribution made by a third-party donor, place the amount in column 3. In each of these columns, only use whole numbers. The percentages below will self-calculate and will tell you what percentage of the funding is match share funds. The percentage must be a minimum of 20%. If you look at the table to your right, you can see that the project sponsor can receive additional points for overmatching on projects. Be aware that your project will be funded at the same cost share ratio submitted in your application. So if you write the application for a 60-40 split, if you're awarded the project, the percentage you'll be reimbursed is based off of what you submitted in the budget. If the cost comes in under budget, we will not be reducing funding on the match share side. Both federal award and match share will be reduced proportionally. If there are costs in the grant column, each phase of the project should be split by the same match share percentage. If the cost is only on if cost only matches in phase 1, it will not be split by the percentage. For example, if you have design work that will be procured after the award and it's $10,000, if your match share percentage is 60-40, then $6,000 would be under the grant request in phase 1, and 4,000 would be under the project sponsor. But if the engineering firm donates their time to design the project, then all 10,000 would be under column 3 donations. If design is being completed by your city engineer, which is match only, it will be placed under the project sponsor column. Question 36 is asking you to give a detailed budget of the project by phases. All costs listed on the budget table should be listed here in the budget narrative. Don't just list what the grant is paying for. You need to include the donation and project sponsor match. Remember that cost in question 36 should equal the cost in question 35. Also remember that if you list it in the project narrative, it should be listed in the budget narrative. In the project schedule column, note the time frame for completion of each phase and include an estimate completion date, month and year for each part, assuming a state start date of October 2024. For phase 1, the expenditures have been broken down by environmental, engineering, and other, and the table has been filled out so you can see what it looks like. Do not specify any vendor or brand names in your estimate. If awarded, you will be required to follow the competitive bidding process. If any of the costs in phase 1 are pre-award costs or donation, make sure to include the information in the narrative. Pre-award costs can be for costs incurred up to 18 months prior to construction authorization date, not from when the application is submitted. So this is phase 3, where you have construction. Said you would put the schedule as an estimated schedule, and then the narratives obviously need to match the budget tables and also the scope of work. Build America, Buy America. Projects with a federal fund, $500,000 or less, U.S. Department of Transportation issued a public interest waiver for Buy America requirement effective 8/16/2023 for specific projects of 500,000 or less, subject to the following limitations. The waiver is from Buy America, Build America, BABA requirements for de minimis cost and small grants to prepare for full compliance with the Bill New America, Made in America standards for construction materials. The public interest waiver of BABA domestic preference is for projects funded under the DOT administered financial assistance program, includes the recreational trails program administered by the Missouri Department of Natural Resources for iron, steel, manufactured products, and construction materials under a single financial assistance award, for which the total amount of the federal assistance applied for the project through awards or subaward is below $500,000. The waiver is applicable only to awards that are obligated or subawards that are made on or after the effective date of the waiver, 8/16/2023. All that being said, there is a waiver for BABA now. If you have had prior awards or have grants that have required the BABA requirement, we talked about earlier, our grants, the maximum you can request is $250,000. So all of the Missouri RTP grants would have this waiver applicable for them. I just want to remind you of some eligible costs that can be listed in your budget table and your project narrative. This information is in the OPSP on page 23 through 26. Costs incurred up to 18 months prior to the project construction approval can be used as match, such as planning cost. You can also use those pre-award costs as your match. Those costs were incurred prior to the project start date, provided a completion for the expenses, in-house use of equipment. Use the 2021 FEMA schedule rate to determine the hourly rate for each piece of equipment. Include a 4-digit code for the schedule rate. And you can find that information again on the OPSP. An eligible cost can be found on page 26 of the grant application. And eligible costs can routine maintenance will include routine maintenance, which includes work that should be conducted on a frequent basis in order to keep the trail in its original constructed state, such as mowing, trimming trees, leaf debris removal, cleaning and repairs of culverts. Overhead costs that are regularly include operating costs such as building rent, upkeep, utilities, insurance, construction of non-eligible sidewalks, and budget contingencies. If you're unaware if the cost allowable, you can check with 2 CFR 200 subpart E cost principles for eligible and ineligible cost for federal grants and the Federal Highways RTP website. We're almost done. In the last section, you'll see something called the discretionary board criteria. This section provides up to 10 points that may be used by the Missouri Trail Advisory Board at their discretion. This assessment allows board members to bring their specific knowledge of statewide and local recreational patterns, resources, and needs into consideration. Members may award points based on subject evaluations of the project. If we look here, this is how the project scored. So we've already kind of gone over each section, but at the very end, let's lower level. This is that 10 points that our board members have the discretion to utilize. The supporting documentation checklist is provided on the application as an aid to project sponsors and should be completed before submitting the application packet. For detailed summaries of each requirement on this item list checklist, go to the instruction in the green application on page 7 and 8. For E-Verify, please make sure to include both the federal and Missouri E-Verify. The Missouri E-Verify or business entity form can be found on page 11 through 14. Make sure to send in both pages of the Missouri E-Verify, boxes A, B, or C, and the affidavit of work authorization. If your project is on public land and you have a draft memorandum agreement, if your project is recommended for funding, a signed memorandum agreement will be executed. Also note that there's 2 different types of maps in the checklist: specific location and area photo maps. Also, templates for the resolution and financial assistance letter can be found in the guide on page 9 through 10. Here's an example of a project map. The Greenway Park and Holt Summit has an overlaid aerial photo, so they only needed one. The Trails Advisory Board indicated to us that they would like to see really good full color maps, no greater than 11 by 17, instead of a lower quality map. So this one has aerial and the specific area of the trailhead as well. The certification of responsible person is the signature section. A responsible official of the sponsored agency must sign and date this section to complete the application, or the application is ineligible and will not be scored. Examples of responsible officials include mayors, city managers or administrators, directors, presidents, executive officers, or chief financial officers. This person should be named in the resolution. The responsible official does not need to be the contact person listed on the application, but does need to read the application and have understanding of the requirements and of administering the grant, should one be awarded. The responsible official cannot be an independent grant writer who is not affiliated with the organization or agency and not currently serving as a board member on the Missouri Trail Advisory Board. An incomplete or an inaccurate application will not be eligible for scoring. Handwritten applications will not be scored. The final step is to mail 2 hard copies of the application and supporting documentation. Applications must be submitted or postmarked by February 21st, 2024. On the bottom, the best way to contact us, we have our email here, and then there's my phone number as well as Patty's. And that's the end of the presentation. Like I said, this will be recorded and posted on our website.